think that's good.
Take the shot down.
Oh. Thank you, Green, for sponsoring today's video.
Yo,
Meeting up the boys at Starbucks to finish up work. Down?
Yeah, sounds good. I think I'm gonna come.
Okay, I'll bring the car around.
Okay. Should I bring the MacBook? I think that's portable. This definitely fits in the bag.
What the
Too much?
Just a little bit.
Okay, well, it's not that simple. The MacBook versus the Mac Studio debate is a bit off the rails in my opinion. I do think it's a topic that should be addressed mainly because I know a lot of you guys seem to be interested in it. The best thing I could do is to answer your questions to really put into perspective both base models, mainly when the price difference is literally non-existent. Both coming in at $1,999 and for my Canadian friends, a whopping $2,499. Would you rather give up CPU power or give up portability? Look, the answer is not as simple. Are you willing to give up an M1 Max chip with a 10-core CPU and a 24-core GPU for an 8-core CPU and a 14-core GPU M1 Pro chip? Let me explain things like if we were all 5. I think it's safe to say that if you have $2,000 to spare for an Apple computer, you might be looking at these two. Both of these computers are base model devices, but physically have a bunch of differences. For starters, your MacBook Pro 14-inch delivers a completely different set of IOs compared to the Studio. The MacBook has a MagSafe port for charging, 3 Thunderbolt 4 ports, an audio jack, HDMI 2.0, and an SD card slot. Comparing this to the Mac Studio, you would be giving up an extra Thunderbolt 4 port, 2 USB-A ports, a 10GB Ethernet port if you are someone like me that enjoys connecting their devices to a switch, and an SDXC slot supporting UHS 2. So if you want to dock the MacBook, I can definitely tell you that a dongle will come in handy. Mostly if you are someone like me that enjoys using a mixer, a dedicated I/O dock, and other peripherals that make your entire workflow much better. Something that Mac Studio doesn't come with is this gorgeous display. You will be missing out on this beautiful mini LED backlit panel with a total resolution of 3024 by 1964 pixels. Out of the box, something like this will make it easy for you to work on your designs if you are a graphic designer or a web developer and work on your photography and videography, all thanks to its wide color gamut. The maximum XDR brightness is great at 1000 nits and 1600 peak nits when consuming HDR content like the Formula 1 show. I think a monitor that can deliver all these things plus True Tone technology and ProMotion technology for adaptive refresh rates up to 120Hz is going to cost you a pretty penny. Mac Studio does support up to 4 Pro Display XDRs and 1 4K display, but of course, they are all sold separately. The only thing I'd like to add is that ProMotion shouldn't be a deal breaker. Honestly, it's nice and all, hard to go back to 60Hz after you've tried it, but keep in mind that my main monitor delivers 60Hz and it's what I spend most of my days on. It really doesn't change much in my productivity at all. Keyboard and trackpad, well, you don't get one with the Studio. In fact, if you'd like to have the same gimmicks the MacBook has, it's going to cost you a deadly $350, so $400 Canadian. Ouch. Yeah, having Touch ID on the Studio is an $80 premium compared to the regular keyboard. I will say they do feel the same when typing on them. Travel is essentially very similar, although their Touch ID speeds are very different. The inbuilt Touch ID sensor on the MacBook is slightly faster, which I think it's to be expected since we are dealing with a full wireless device by using the Magic Keyboard. As for the trackpad, honestly they are very similar, a bit less resistance on the Magic Trackpad too, but do note you are getting a much larger surface area with it. The only downside is that unlike the MacBook, you do need to charge your wireless peripherals. It's a bummer, but you can't forget that the MacBook also needs to be charged. The cool thing about it is that you can always go with third-party chargers. Because I bring it home with me, I wanted to get something portable like the Ugreen Nexode 100-watt charger. Like that, I can always leave this in my backpack and have my dedicated charger in the studio at all times. This does charge my MacBook in about an hour, and Ugreen claims that it can fully charge your MacBook Pro 16-inch in 1.5 hours. I haven't noticed a major difference, by the way, between using MagSafe and a regular USB-C cable. The cool thing is that I can not only charge my MacBook on it, but also my iPhone. When connected all together, charging speeds will vary, but the iPhone does get up to 60% in 30 minutes when plugged in alone. It's awesome, honestly. Its gun chip and foldable plug allows this charger to fit in the palm of my hand without sacrificing quality or power. I do suggest you check out the Ugreen Nexode 100-watt charger. I'll leave a link in the description like I always do with their tech. Just know that once your MacBook is fully powered up, the quality of the sound these speakers deliver compared to the studio is night and day. The studio does have speakers, so you can save a bit of money if that's not a concern, but it's hard. It's hard to neglect the fact that you might be missing out on the 6-speaker sound system. These do have force cancelling woofers, a wide stereo sound, and support for spatial audio when playing music or video with Dolby Atmos. This also means that the latest generation of AirPods supports this feature.
And I think we try and implement the same thing when we're educating about creators, is to make sure that we include every single mistake, because that's actually where all the learning is happening.
Right. I mean, content creation is...
In terms of sound, you are missing a lot with the Mac Studio, and the fact that you don't even get a camera is a killer as well. You get so much more of your money's worth with the MacBook, or do you? The M1 Max versus the M1 Pro is definitely a discussion worth having. If we grab a benchmark software that can evaluate these computers' hardware capabilities, you can see that the difference between both these computers mainly lie within their multi-core scores. To explain this like if we were 5, here is an analogy. Say you have 2 highways. We all know highways have a speed limit and multiple lanes. On Highway 1, you have a speed limit of 80, but it's an 8-lane highway. On Highway 2, you have a speed limit of 140, but it only has 2 lanes. If you had a fast car like say a 718 GT4, you're better off on Highway 2. But if you had a bunch of trucks, you're almost likely better on Highway 1, just because you can have more trucks going at the same time. Most games rather have a higher speed limit with only 2 cars on the highway simultaneously. Meanwhile, most productivity softwares prefer the opposite, having more than 8 trucks on the road altogether, which means that more cores deliver better processing power, which translates into faster video performance. As a result, the multi-core scores are what truly count in our comparison. To put things into practice on a heavy software like Premiere Pro, we decided to open the same project on both machines, and here were our results.
Okay, so what I'm about to show you is actually pretty simple. I just want to show you the performance of the Mac Studio on Premiere. If I actually am on full resolution right here, and note that our files are very heavy, they are S-Log, and you know, we had to color grade them. It's pretty freaking quick. If I press space, you will note that the playback is super smooth. I can even pause it, run it on the timeline. You can see everything is super nice. If I go back here and let's say I want to add some text, it's very quick. I can write hello, very responsive. Click on it, move it the way I want it, wherever I want it. It's really, really good. I really like it. I can even go to the extent of opening Lightroom while the Premiere Pro is opened, and we can maybe go and import. Let's try to import anything really, any stuff that we have right here. Let's go on check all, and maybe check like these ones right here. Yeah, I can check all of this right here. Maybe, yeah, there you go. So we can import that. And you guys will get to see importing is pretty quick, even though we have the Premiere Pro timeline open, which is a huge project. And there you go. I can go ahead and start editing, you know, lower my shadows, highlights down, exposure a bit up, contrast down. can add some yellow, greenish tones, vibrance a bit more, texture, clarity. It's super responsive, and look at the size of this project. It's huge. As for the MacBook Pro, note that we are still running the same exact project, full resolution for our playback. And if we click space, you guys will see it takes a bit of time to run, and sometimes the head will jump like that, just like it just did. It just lags here and there. It happens quite often, to be honest. If I want to show you guys like frame by frame like this by dragging the head, it doesn't render the image right away. It doesn't show it right away. I can go ahead and, I don't know, type some text. See, that's taking some time. It's not as smooth as the Mac Studio. And I can try to maybe make it a bit bigger so I can drag it around. Very laggy in my opinion. It really isn't the same experience. But on Lightroom, it is the exact same experience. I really didn't notice any difference even when opening the project. Let's go into import. I can go ahead and take the same SD card and check everything, and I can just start importing the same amount of images we did with the Mac Studio. Say around that. Importing, honestly, the same. The operations are literally the same. Importing takes the same amount of time. If I go and develop, I can, I don't know, develop anything really. Exposure up, contrast down, highlights down, shadows. We can play with the whites. We can play with the temperature, the green, bring a bit down exposure, the vibrance, you know, clarity, you know, put it up, down, whatever. Very responsive. For Lightroom, it's just, I think this is way worth it. I wouldn't pay the extra money if you're editing pictures. It does a great job.
As you can see, Premiere's performance is quite different on both machines, but when it comes to Lightroom, I wouldn't necessarily consider the Mac Studio over the MacBook. When talking Premiere, the same difference will be noticed when dealing with something like Blender that is GPU heavy. A difference in GPU performance will yield differences when it comes to rendering based tasks like images and animations, viewport performance, and denoising. Also, I ran a proper Xcode benchmark on both machines this time again, and I got a big difference in terms of results. The power differences they both yield were about a minute apart when compiling this big Xcode project. For programming, it's still not enough to tell, but I personally will be doing further tests in the future. I can't imagine the results on a beefier spec. Regardless, for iOS development, I would say they are both as good, but the M1 Max takes the win here. When it comes to most productivity software, a higher CPU core count does yield better performance, but numbers will never tell the full story. With everyday applications like Excel, Notion, Slack, Microsoft Teams, Chrome, Adobe Reader, and so on, you will never be able to tell the difference. At least 90% of people will never be able to feel the extra power on these apps. Even when I fed the VLC media player with heavy codec files from my Sony 7S Mark III, I did not notice a difference. What does this all mean? Is it even worth giving up your portability for a desktop? Not at this price point. If you had the M1 Ultra in mind, or maybe a maxed out M1 Max, then the discussion would be different. But at $2,000, it's not. Most people will get so much more of their money's worth with a MacBook at that price. But for us professionals that need those extra cores, it's hard for me to recommend the base model. We've been editing a few videos already with a maxed out M1 Max model, and the difference is quite big. But the price as well. I would say save your money and get those extra M1 Max cores and more RAM. As for most users, remember that a laptop can always be fun to pair with cool accessories. Whether those are dongles, skins, laptop sleeves, it makes the experience a bit more enjoyable. You won't have this little bulky box sitting on a desk. Although I have to admit, the Mac can really be an easy item to carry around and can be a lifesaver if you ever experience a blackout. But the fact that it needs to be paired up with a keyboard, a mouse, a screen, a webcam, and even speakers if you care about sound, it's a killer for me, and so accessories are something you need to think about. Suddenly, your $2,000 investment is not $2,000 anymore. Your wallet will hate you. I really wanted to address this topic. I feel like some of you are confused about it when you shouldn't. I hope you learned a few things in the computer world with all the jargon I threw at you. If you like me explaining things like if we were 5, let me know. I think it's a cool thing to educate ourselves while still consuming content. A dedicated review for programmers will come soon right after I clear some doubts about the 12.9-inch iPad for students. I will see you all next week. Take care.